Well, it's kind of a longer story. It goes back to when I was about 14, and a great teacher at Fenwick High School outside Chicago taught us the arguments for God's existence from Thomas Aquinas, and that had just a life-changing impact on me and set me on a path I've never really left. So it started when I was just a kid, a teenager, and it started as an intellectual interest, and then it developed over the years into more of a personal, commitment, a desire to really give my life to God. So it started, though, when I was a high school kid. Well, I was at Mundelein for many years as a professor. So I started teaching in 1992 after I got back from Paris with my doctorate. And I love teaching. I think I'm kind of a born teacher. That gives me great joy. And I did it for many years. Taught systematic theology, so dogma. Taught at different levels, the pre-theology. I taught first-year students. I taught advanced STL students, directed STL dissertations. So I loved the life of the mind. I loved books and ideas and teaching. So that was a great joy. It was in 2012 that Cardinal George asked me to be rector of Mundelein. And I was very surprised by that, but delighted. And I'd been there for a long time, so I knew the personalities. I knew the history. I knew what I felt needed to be done. So, I moved into that job with a certain confidence and joy. And I loved it. I was rector for 3 years, and having the chance to form these students, to be a kind of a spiritual father to them, was a source of great joy to me. I'm also the shortest serving rector in Mundelein's history, because I was in for only 3 years till 2015 when I was named a bishop. But they were wonderful years. Yeah, Word on Fire goes back to around the turn of the millennium, like around the year 2000. I've been doing teaching, obviously, and writing. Also, I'd been a public speaker on the speaking circuit around the Catholic world, a lot of retreats and workshops and that sort of thing. But it always bugged me. I felt that we Catholics were behind the curve when it came to the new media and social media and communications. And I felt that our Protestant friends had done much better than we. I felt that Fulton Sheen was the great pioneer, Catholic, but then we kind of dropped the ball. So that was, kind of percolating in me. That was bugging me, all that. So I decided to try something. So I called WGN Radio in Chicago, which is the biggest radio station. And I just went down there and said, tell me, what would it cost for me to have a sermon program? And they said, well, we have an excellent time at 5:15 Sunday morning, and for 15 minutes, and it would cost you $50,000 to do that for a year. So I said, okay, and I went to the parish where I was helping out at the time, and I told them that story. I just said, hey, I'm interested in doing this, and here's what it will cost, and they gave me the money. So I raised that first $50,000, and then it went from there. So I think I did that for the next 3 or 4 years. And then it expanded out to Relevant Radio, which is a Catholic radio network. Then we started doing DVDs, videos of retreats and talks that I've been giving. And those got on EWTN. And that kind of brought it to a new level. And then I began to dream at that point about a big project. And that's where the Catholicism series came from. I wanted to do something like Kenneth Clark's great Civilization series, but about the Catholic faith, to go to the wonderful places, the beautiful places, show the faith, and talk about it. So that was an idea. I ran it past my board, and they said, well, we think you should do that. And Cardinal George, God bless him, got behind me and said, okay, whatever I need to do, I'll do. And then we just had to raise about $5 million. So we started that process. And again, I say it's a great tribute to the Catholic faithful. I had nothing really to show them. I just had an idea. And we went to all kinds of fundraisers and just begged for money. And I told people that our parents and grandparents gave money for the great Catholic institutions, parishes and schools and seminaries and so on, which is great, and they're permanently needed. But I said now, people aren't coming to our institutions to be evangelized. We have to go to them. We have to go out to them. And I said the way to do that now, it seems to me, is through the video world, the media, especially new media. So people got that idea, and they gave us the money, and we were able to make the series. And then it was played on PBS, and that kind of brought it to a wider audience. So that's kind of the short version of the Word on Fire story. It was a passion, I'd say, to evangelize, to find those who had wandered away, to get those who would not come to us. And that's what inspired me. I'll tell you exactly where it came from. I was always taken by the Lord's great line, I've come to light a fire on the earth, you know. So at a certain stage, maybe it's 2005 or 6, we were thinking, now we got to have a name for this ministry. You know, at that point, we had a website, we had the sermon show, but not really a name. So I was around a table with my good friend, Father Steve Grunow, who's now the CEO of Word on Fire, and Father Paul Murray. Father Paul Murray is a wonderful Dominican priest, spiritual teacher at the Angelos in Rome. And he was that year at Mundelein as a visiting scholar. And Paul's also a very fine poet. So the three of us were around the table. I said, okay, we got to find a name. And I said, all right, come to light a fire on the earth. Fire on the earth. Spread the fire. But it's a word ministry. It's a preaching ministry, you know, preaching with fire. And we were knocking things around. And finally it was Father Steve who said, Word on Fire. And then Paul, the poet, said, you're not going to do any better than that. And that was it. That's where the name came from. We live in a society that is increasingly secularized. I mean, that's almost a banality to say now. We all know it. Young people are leaving the churches in droves. A secularist ideology is taking over more and more, especially among the young. And so we need, more than ever, people to remind us of the transcendent dimension. Because, see, we're all Augustinians. What I mean is, we all know deep down that, Lord, you've made us for yourself, and therefore the heart is restless till it rests in thee, right? The single greatest statement of Christian anthropology, page 1 of the Confession. Lord, you made us for yourself. And see, we know that because whatever goods the world gives us, of wealth and fame and power and pleasure, they don't satisfy us. They're good, but they don't satisfy the deepest longing of the heart. We all know that. Religion is there to tell people explicitly why, and to tell them what will satisfy the deepest hunger. So prayer is just a way of saying conversation with God. It's an openness to God. It's a raising of the mind and heart to God, as John of Damascus said. More than ever, therefore, we need people to witness to prayer. Well, I'll tell you, I've always loved monks and the Benedictine tradition. This goes back to my time at Bennett Academy, this Benedictine high school outside Chicago, and going to Mass there on Sunday at the Abbey of St. Procopius. When I was a young kid, a teenager, I discovered Thomas Aquinas, as I mentioned, but I also discovered Thomas Merton. So I read The Seven-Storey Mountain when I was about 16, and I was caught up in all the sort of romance of the story of a man falling in love with God. And of course, becoming a Trappist, he enters into this radical expression of the Benedictine tradition. And so I've had this affection for monasticism from those days. My retreat prior to priesthood ordination, I did at St. Meinrad, Archabbey down in southern Indiana. And to this day, I remain kind of haunted by that trip, haunted by the beauty of the monastic chant. I remember leaving the guest house and coming across to the church, and it was kind of this misty, foggy morning, and coming into the church and then hearing the monks chant the ancient psalms. That entered my heart in a way that's just changed me and never left me. For years, both in America and then in Europe when I was studying over there, I would typically do my retreat at a Benedictine house. So I've loved monasticism, the Benedictine life, ever since I was a teenager. And I think more than ever now, it's needed in our society. Well, the Psalms have been recognized from the earliest days as expressive of that deepest longing of the heart for God, and expressive of the whole range of human emotion and experience. Why are the Psalms important? Well, just look at the history of the church. Look at the great spirits who were fed by the Psalms. When monks pray the Psalms today, it links them to not just the ancient church, go way back now into the Old Testament period. It links us 3,000 years ago. And so I love that. I love the integrity, I love the history, and I love the tradition of the Psalms. Human beings have not fundamentally changed that much. Our technology's advanced, our political forms are different, all that. But our basic spiritual orientation, our basic spiritual hungers, they haven't changed. And the Psalms give voice to that in a way that's both poetically beautiful and spiritually evocative. And so, thank God there are people today who, as their main job, pray the Psalms on behalf of the whole church, on behalf of the whole world. That's the indispensable contribution that monks make. I think of Jesus himself, of course, said, "I'm the light of the world." And we don't see light, really. We see things by means of light. Christ is that by which we see the world properly. He's like the sun. You could stare at the sun, but you'd be blinded. You see things in the light of the sun. And so we see all of life. We understand what it's all about in his light. So that's what it's all about. I mean, all ministry in the church is trying to bring the luminosity of Jesus so that we can properly see the world. I'm delighted to receive an award with that name because that's what it's all about. If someone came to me asking about a religious call, like they feel a call to religious life, I would tell them to take it with utmost seriousness because, as I mentioned, we have, especially today, this extraordinary need to be awakened to the spiritual dimension. And Christ never gives up on his church. That's a basic principle of the spiritual life. I mean, we always have the freedom to say yes or no, but he's never reluctant in the way he invites. Especially today, we need people who have this keen sense of the supernatural. So I would tell a young man who's saying, "Hey, I'm feeling this tug toward religious life or monastic life," I'd say, follow it. Now, I can't pronounce perfectly, "Oh yeah, you've definitely got a vocation." That takes time and that takes prayer and discernment. But I would say, take it with utmost seriousness. One thing that the studies have shown is that a lot of young people, an extraordinary number, I won't get it exactly right, but an extraordinary number, have said they felt a call to the priesthood or religious life at some point. The tragedy is they often didn't know what to do with that. There was no one to talk to about it. They didn't know what to do. So I would say, listen very carefully to that call, and then do the serious work of discernment. Yeah, the Bible is a great image of Moses and his arms raised in prayer. And while he prays, then the Israelite army does well. When his arms fall down, right, then the battle goes the other way. And then these two figures, Aaron and Hur, come and they hold up his arms, and then he's able to pray to support the army. Well, from the time of the church fathers, that scene's been read as a kind of icon or metaphor for the church. So there's some people in the church who are right in the thick of the battle. They're the ecclesia militans, right? The fighting church that's out there in the front lines of the culture and so on and so forth, engaging it. The fighters. There's some people in the church who are the prayers. And without prayer, the fight doesn't go well, period. End of argument. The Bible couldn't be clearer on that. Without prayer, nothing great ever happens. And so there are people that pray. They raise their arms all the time. There's the monastic life, if you want. There's those who are dedicated to prayer. Now, what's needed? You need support for that life. You need people to say, "We support you as you pray." Think of Aaron and Hur now as all those people in the life of the church who support those who pray, who in turn support those who fight, so that the whole life of the church can function. Aaron and Hur disappear, prayer disappears. Prayer disappears, the battle doesn't go well. And so I would say to people, hey, maybe you're not up to the direct battle. Okay, whether it's because of your station in life or your age or whatever it is, I don't know. And maybe, look, you don't have a call to monastic life. You're not called to a life dedicated to prayer. But maybe you got the vocation of Aaron and Hur. You got the vocation of holding up the arms of those who pray. Now, what that means concretely is, in a place like a monastery, who's going to pay for the buildings? Who's going to pay for the heating and electricity? Who's going to pay for the upkeep? Who's going to pay for the food? Et cetera, et cetera. My years as Rector of Mundelein, I know that very well. I mean, here's the seminary, a place where priests are being trained. But a seminary means buildings and roofs and pipes and water and heat and food and all that stuff. Who provides that? We had wonderful people. I remember I was always amazed at that when I was rector, the number of people that gave bequests and their wills and donations to keep us going. That could be your calling, I'll say to some people. That could be your calling, to hold up the arms of those who pray, who in turn support the fight. I mean, I think one of the great challenges that any bishop faces today in the church in America is secularism, a loss of the sense of the sacred, the sense that I don't need God, that the goods of the world can satisfy me. And then relatedly, I'd say it's this whole ideology of self-invention. I decide the meaning of my life. It's up to me and my freedom. We had a debate out here in California recently around the assisted suicide issue. And I remember seeing a billboard, and it said, "My life, my death, my choice." I'm thinking, that's completely repugnant to the Bible, which would say, whether we live or we die, we are the Lord's, right? It's not my life. It's not my death. My death doesn't belong to me. It's not my choice. It doesn't belong to me either. So we're up against an ideology of self-invention. Freedom is absolutized. I decide the meaning and purpose of my life. That's repugnant to the Bible, which says your life is not about you. It's about God and how God is going to use you for his purposes. Who's going to teach that lesson? You know, I think that's the great challenge of the church right now in our culture, is that we have to stand, and it might mean we're very unpopular. It might mean we're like a voice crying in the wilderness. It might mean we sound like we're old-fashioned. But someone's got to speak this old truth, that we don't make it up as we go along, that we've been given truth and goodness and beauty. We're meant to integrate them into our lives. We're meant to cooperate with God's grace and God's truth. More than ever, it seems to me, that's needed. Now, where's evangelization going to go? I mean, I'm with John Paul. The new evangelization's got to be new in ardor, new in expression, and new in method, he said. Well, ardor, we got to keep on fire. New in expression, that means we got to be creative in the ways that we communicate the faith. Here I think Pope Francis is very helpful. Saying it in a new and fresh way, saying it in a way that's attractive and not punitive, you know. But then finally new in method. And that means following the line opened up by these new technologies. I've argued for years that this is beyond Gutenberg in terms of a revolution in communication technology. What Gutenberg meant in the late 15th, early 16th century, I think it's even more radically present now, that there's this explosion in communication technology. We're able to reach people in a way that you couldn't have imagined 25, 30 years ago. That's an opportunity for the church. And I think the new evangelization has to follow that line.